Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Handyman in the Field. Today we are talking about another topic, specifically whether it's a good idea to do estimates in person. So I'm not, as always, I'm going to preface this with what you do is going to be different than what I do. I'm just giving you my advice from what I've learned to see what works and what doesn't work. So initially, when I first started off, and I think this is probably very important for people who are starting up, is that you have to think about your time. Your time is valuable. You're probably going to be underpricing yourself initially because that's just how it ends up working out. But one of the things you're not going to account for is when you go to an estimate and you do not land it, and how that does not translate into actual money. There are some contractors who will say doing an estimate is a chance to sell yourself, and I will not disagree with that. I 100% agree with that sentiment. The problem is that when you're initially starting off, you absolutely obviously can sell yourself, which we've talked about in a previous video, but the problem is that you also sometimes can talk yourself out of the job. One of the things I remember very distinctly early on was that as I was starting off, if I went to a job and it was something that I wasn't as familiar with, it wasn't something that they had any intention of me doing at that moment, but it was something that I was not as familiar with. It doesn't mean that I couldn't have figured it out if I had a little bit of time or if I could research it or anything like that. It doesn't mean that at all. The problem is that that's not how it turns out when you're starting out. You sometimes can make yourself not sound as if you know what you're doing because of whatever the situation is. So let's say someone's talking about, I need a toilet replaced. If you don't know ahead of time what you're getting yourself into, there's no way of being able to sell the idea of being able to, replace a toilet. If you've never replaced a toilet before, you probably need to figure out how to do that before you start talking to a customer in person and then giving them a price. But this all goes back to the idea of knowing how much time is actually necessary to complete a job. Most customers, especially ones who are looking for in-person estimates, they are going to want a price right then and there. You're not going to have an option or an opportunity to kind of come up with your price. You're gonna try to insist, I will send you a complete estimates for you to approve. And what will probably most likely end up happening is they'll say, well, can you just ballpark, give me an idea of what it's gonna cost. I don't blame somebody who's done that. I've had plenty of contractors over the years for my own personal residence that I've had that exact question for, because I want a general idea of what I'm getting into. If they're going to give me a price and it's going to be way exorbitantly higher than what I was anticipating, then I can just tell them, well, I apologize for wasting your time, but unfortunately, I didn't have any idea it was going to be anywhere near that much. That happens a lot when you're starting out and you're not established. When you become established, it's a little bit different. But in the very beginning, when you're trying to establish yourself, the idea is that you're trying to make sure that the information that you're giving them is reliable. You're trying to sell yourself, show how quality you are by showing up, looking the part, and all of that. But the problem is that one of the other things that you distinctly have to do is you have to be able to give them a general idea of what it's going to cost. Now, what I've learned over the years is that when I first started, I went to any customer who reached out initially. I went to their residence, I talked to them in person, and I tried to, get the job. I'm not trying to be egotistical by saying this, but for some reason, I was very good at selling the job. I had, I'll be honest, my close rate for jobs is probably over 95% every year since I started. And honestly, some of the only jobs that I haven't closed has nothing to do with them them getting somebody else to do the job. It actually more has to do with the fact that they didn't have the budget for it, or something comes up last minute and they unexpectedly have to push it off. In those situations, there's nothing you can do and there's nothing that you could have done differently. You did exactly what they wanted you to do. They just can't do it. And that's been my case. Now, that said, there's a couple of things that I will say about that. When you are in that situation where you have to give a price in person, it can backfire. It can backfire badly, because what can end up happening is you can have a scenario occur where they are adamant about you giving them a price, you give them a price, you get back to the office afterwards, you start calculating it out, and it ends up being exorbitantly more expensive than what you told them in person. They're not going to like that. Even if they did ask for that ballpark, and it could have just been that, you missed something when you were giving them the ballpark. That's the problem. So the first thing I would suggest to do, even if you're starting out or if you're established, is that you try to find out as much information about what they're trying to do before you go there. I personally do a lot of my estimates over the phone. I've had customers who have said, well, don't you want to come out and see the work? And I specifically say to them, no, unless there's something that's abnormal about what you're presenting as the job, it's not something that's going to be very different than some of the, tens to hundreds of other times we've done this specific job. We know that there is a certain range of how much time it can take, and we base our prices off of that range. A good example is like a bathtub caulking. You have to scrape out the existing caulk, you've got to put down new caulk. That stuff, it can go very easily. It can take a lot of time. Honestly, a lot of it has to do with the quality of the caulk that's coming up, whether or not there's a lot of mildew that needs to be cleaned before you apply the new caulk, and that's generally it. But with a picture, or I honestly don't even need a picture nowadays. Most of the time, if they tell me it's a bathtub compared to a shower pan, have a general idea of how much there is. There's going to be more caulk involved with a tub than there will be a shower pan. But generally speaking, it's pretty straightforward. You can judge based off of it. You can't go off the idea that it's only going to take an hour, because it might be longer than an hour. It might be less than an hour. You have to have that average of what it is and then price that job based off of what the average is. But that said, the whole reason I'm saying this is because when they ask you for an estimate, you should be trying to gather as much information before you go to their house. So what I typically do is, if a customer calls me, first time they've ever called me, I specifically try to find out what town they're in, what the job is that they're looking to do, and how quickly they want it done. Those three things are very important. And the reason why is because if they are outside my area, that will disqualify them from me being able to do their work in the first place. If they're looking for it within a time frame that I can't provide, then I also have to disqualify myself. And if it's a job that I cannot perform because it's either something that I do not do, or it's something that I'm not licensed to do, or it's something that I am unable to do, or it's something that I prefer not to do, then that will also disqualify me. I don't want to waste their time by showing up to their house and then telling them in person, sorry, unfortunately I can't do this, because I've wasted their time, and I've wasted my own time too, just because I didn't ask those simple questions ahead of time. So ask those questions ahead of time. If it is something that you do, it is in the service area that you work in, and it is within a time frame that you realistically can get it done, then you've got two options. If it's a simpler job that you've done a lot, you can give them a price right away based off of your understanding of how that job could go. The other option is if it's something where it's like they have a laundry list of stuff, you can tell from talking to them that they feel more comfortable interacting with you in person because they've never worked with you before. You can gauge that kind of information by talking to them over the phone. If that's necessary where you have to go out, then you go out and you talk about the stuff, but you have to make sure that whatever it is that they want to talk about, you have to make sure that you know what to do. If it's something that you can't do or that you're not familiar with, you have to communicate that right away, because otherwise that will come back to bite you. Those things will lead to you not getting the job if you are not upfront about something you can't do. Case in point, as I said, I typically do a lot of my estimates over the phone. I did have a new customer who reached out to me a couple days ago. They specifically they got my voicemail, which clearly states, if you want a faster response, shoot me a text message with the following information: the town you live in, your name, the work that you're looking for, and how quickly you need it done. Most people will either leave a voicemail or they will eventually, or they'll send a text instead of leaving a voicemail, or they just don't leave any message because they're assuming that if you're not picking up the phone, you're too busy. And to be honest, at this moment in time, that is definitely my case. There's occasionally I'll pick up a phone call in the middle of the day if I'm available because I'm not at a job site. But if that's the case, then I will talk to that person, but and I'll try to get as much information I can, but I can get the same information from a voicemail and I can get the same information from a text message. It's also easier to communicate via text because they might not have pictures of what they're talking about. They might need to explain it in better detail with a picture. They might not have any idea what it is that they're actually looking for. So those things are things that you can gain information through a text, and gives them a chance to respond back and take time to respond back to you rather than being on the phone and being like, oh, I don't have that. A couple weeks ago, I had somebody who called me who said they had a vinyl gate in front of their property that the hinge was bent. He hit the hinge and it was bent. Now, I don't have any idea whether or not it's something I can fix until I see it. I don't know if it's a hinge that I can easily get, or if it's a hinge that's from a fencing company that I have to order online and it's going to take time. I don't know any information. Going to the property just to get a picture isn't going to be beneficial for me. I ended up calling this customer back, called them, talked to them over the phone, explained that if they could send me a picture, then I could figure out whether or not it was something that I could take care of. And they never sent me a picture and never communicated back. It wasn't that they didn't want to get it done. Maybe they had somebody else who was willing to come out and take care of it, and that's what has to happen. When you are somebody who doesn't have employees and you don't have the ability to just go on estimates nonstop, you have to, because you're an owner-operator, which is what I am, you don't have the ability to drive all over the place and taking time away from actually making money for your business, for your family, to support what you need to support, just to give somebody an answer of, sorry, I can't do this anyway. It's not something I can take care of. And you need to be aware of that. You need to be conscious of that so that you're not wasting your time. I have had customers who have asked me, do you want to come out and take a look? And I've said, no, I don't need to take a look. If you feel more comfortable with me seeing a picture of it, you can certainly send me a picture and I can take a look at it and tell you if there's anything outside, the price that I'm giving you. But generally speaking, it'll be within that price range. But going back to what I was saying before, so one of the reasons you would go to the customer's house is if they have a laundry list or you can tell that they feel more comfortable meeting with you. I typically will not do that unless it's within like a 10 to 15 mile or 10 to 15 minute drive from my shop. I have a lot of competition in the area. There's a lot of other companies that exist that do what I do. I understand that. I understand I'm not the only person out there who's a handyman or can fix things. My ideal customer is someone who is tech savvy, who has a certain level of income. If they have a certain level of income, it's very likely they are tech savvy. They'll be able to take a picture and communicate via text. They're also the same people who will be comfortable with, interacting with you on a regular basis, with you sending them text updates on things and sending them pictures. If you are a customer who's not tech savvy, I have plenty of customers who aren't. All they're looking for is a price and they want to say yes, and then you come out and they write you a check or pay you cash, and that's the end of it. Now, that's great, but that is not necessarily the ideal customer, because those customers can be on a fixed income. They might not be able to do more than just the bare repairs that they absolutely need to do. So there's limitations. My ideal customer is, late 20s, all the way up to like early 50s, married, double income households, both working professionals who, that live in the house. That is my ideal customer. And the reason why is because they see something that's wrong, they want to get it fixed. You can tell them that there's something wrong and they will want to get it fixed. You find something that you see that is something that they would never even notice, and they're going to want to get it fixed because they have the money and they don't want something to happen to what they have. Those customers are a lot easier to deal with when it comes to giving them prices. I have a lot of customers who they don't even ask for prices. They know my prices are reasonable, and they know when they get the bill, they're not going to be upset about the bill being too high. I have a bunch of customers like that. That doesn't mean I take advantage of them. It means that they are comfortable with me as someone who does work to complete the work that needs to be done for a reasonable price. So the other customers out there that are needing to have in-person estimates are for bigger jobs. I'm going to talk about in maybe next week's episode about big jobs and little jobs and the benefits and the cons, the pros and cons for each version of types of jobs. The big jobs you can have much more profit margin. The little jobs you can get a lot more done in a shorter amount of time, and you can also fluctuate your schedule a lot easier with little jobs. I'm going to talk about that more, but when it comes to big jobs, you really do need to be in person, but you cannot give a ballpark in person. If it's a ballpark, it's like a huge range, and I mean a big range. If you're redoing a bathroom, I mean like a range of a couple thousand, because it's all going to come down to what types of material they're using, how much time the material that they're choosing to use is going to take to install that thing. I had a bathroom last year that it was a very small powder room, vanity, toilet, that's it. The customer wanted to replace the toilet and the vanity, and normally that would be a very quick day job. There was a couple of hiccups with this. They were wanting to install a toilet that had a built-in bidet. There was no electric for the bidet, so electric needed to be run for the bidet. The new toilet or the new vanity was taking up a different footprint in the room than the existing footprint. So then there was other aspects, including painting involved and things like that. Now, I don't have to do that. They can certainly take care of that. But the problem is that if you don't think about these things, it's going to come up. There was a light fixture that needed to be replaced, but the fixture they were replacing it with was a backlit mirror. So there was no longer a light fixture except for this backlit mirror. It looks great. Great, it all looks great, but this simple powder room that if I was just told it's a vanity, it's a toilet, it's a light fixture, it would take a day. This job specifically took 4 days because of how much detail work was involved. There was baseboards that were involved in needing to be modified. There was an issue with the quarter round that needed to be replaced. There was a lot of like minute little things that needed to be done to make sure that this was what they wanted it to be. Even though it was not ripping out tile, even though it was not changing any of the actual like mechanicals as far as the, plumbing or anything like that. The electric for the bidet was the only thing that needed to be added. But outside of that, everything else was straightforward. But if you don't think about those things, and you give a price and you say, oh, it's going to be $700 to replace a toilet and a vanity. Because in your mind, that's what your day rate is, and you're saying to yourself, it's not going to take me longer than a day to do this. When it takes you 3 days or 4 days and you're still within that range, you've got a problem. So that's the thing to make sure is when you go to bigger jobs and you choose to do bigger jobs, if you start getting into smaller remodels or larger paint jobs and things like that, or another example is like a large punch list of move in or move out repairs. I do those a lot. You have to figure out, you cannot just throw out a number and then expect them to be completely okay with that. You have to be thinking about the fact that when you get back, you're going to have to calculate some of the materials. I had a job a couple weeks ago where there was one part that was almost $400 for a door repair that labor-wise was only going to be like a 30-minute job, but the labor or the materials was going to be $400. Now, do you think that the customer thought it was going to be, a $500 job? No, I don't think they did, but it was going to be a $500 job because of that specific part. And sometimes you don't know that information. You're only going to find that out over time, and you're going to have to tell customers that information up front. So whether you do an estimate in person or whether you do it over the phone or text, it's up to you how you do it. I would suggest in the beginning, if you're especially trying to make yourself more well-known, it's easier to sell yourself. You don't necessarily have that backlog of like, great 5-star reviews on Google. You don't have, reviews other places. You might not have the website yet. You might not have other things that could establish you, make you look more established. You might not have a van that's wrapped. You might not have, anything but whatever vehicle you're driving. It's easier to sell yourself in person than with all that other stuff that you don't necessarily have the funds for initially. So that's the important thing. Now, as you get busier and you have less time, it's going to become harder and harder to do in-person estimates. It doesn't mean you can't do them. It means that you have to pick and choose which ones make the most sense. If a customer is, as they say, kicking the tires and trying to figure out whether or not it's a project they even want to do, you shouldn't be wasting your time if they're not actually thinking legitimately they're going to be doing this. It's easier to give a customer a price and have them decide that it's too expensive over the phone than it is for you to spend time driving out there, spending money on gas, spending money on tolls, depending on where you are, spending time actually going out there that you could be doing a job that you actually make real money. It's unfortunate when you can't land something, but you can't prevent yourself from landing something for the sake of I've got to do every estimate in person. It's just not always possible. I know that there are guys and companies out there who that is what they do. They have somebody in their crew that literally all they do is estimates. And that's fine if that's what you have the capability. But as an owner operator, it's very difficult to juggle that. So hopefully this was useful for you guys. If you want to hear more about things that happen week to week within my job, especially about estimates, and then how they lead to jobs and how much my jobs actually cost and things like that, be sure to check out my weekly series, This Week in the Field, which comes out on a weekly basis on Monday mornings. I cover basically a slew of whatever jobs I had for that week, whatever new customers I gained, whatever estimates I go out on, things like that. And you can hear how frequently I go out on estimates because it's not that frequently. So with all of that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I appreciate you guys liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment in the comment section below. Please share this video with anybody else you think might need it. And with all that being said, we'll see you guys next time.